So for those of you who may not know, my name's Austin Ross, and I love heavy starch, extra heavy starch. This is why I'm excited to share with you the opportunity I got to build this rack for the cleaners lady here in town. It's actually a boutique, but she goes to the bigger town down the road and gets cleaning done and then has to haul all this cleaning back to her boutique here in town so us welders here in town can have our starch. And I was just super excited to help with this project because I love starch. And if you're like me and you like your heavy starch, you might be interested in this extra heavy starch cleaners bag that we have in my store, arosswelding.com, under the shop tab. Super excited about those also. Support your local cleaners and support extra heavy starch. So fresh, so clean. So whenever I first started this project, I did have a rough idea of what kind of track system I was gonna use, because a few weeks before I started this project, I had actually seen this roller idea on YouTube, here on YouTube. A channel called The Wooden Factor is where I found it. This is where I got my idea that I used for this project. So what this guy did was he essentially just took rollers, little bitty rollers. I looked on Amazon, looked online everywhere, and found like the dimension that I wanted, because they make all different sizes of rollers. But I had an idea of the size I wanted versus the size of bolt I was gonna have to use. The difference between what he did and what I did, I just took his idea and I just beefed it up more or less. Probably too beefy for this, but I mean, it's not going anywhere. That's just my go-to, as I overbuild things, but I think it ought to last forever. So the first thing I did was I got some 2 square 11 gauge and I built me a frame 32 inches wide by 120 inches long. If I could do it over again, I would use something a little shorter than 2 inch, because I didn't need 2 inches tall. In my head, when I first started building this thing, I thought that I needed something stout on that bottom, but later on I found out I didn't need anything that tall, because the next thing I did after I built that frame was I put some 3/8 by 6 inch flat with holes drilled in it to where my rollers were gonna bolt. And that 6 inch flat, even if it was thinner, if I could do it over again, I would go with a little bit thinner material also instead of 3/8. Didn't quite need 3/8 thick, but I'd probably go with like 1/4 instead. Either way, that 6 inch flat is super strong standing up like this, so I didn't need that 2 inches. But yeah, I mean, you live and you learn. That's what I love about custom projects. That's the bad thing about being a welder and not an engineer, is there's a lot of questions whenever it comes to custom stuff. We don't know what size of material we need, and I've always leaned on the side of heavier built versus janky or, you know, thinner built, because I want whatever I build to last a long time. Like, I don't want it breaking or falling apart or only lasting 5-10 years. I want it to last a lifetime plus. So my go-to is always heavy. But anyway, that's, like I said, once I built that frame, I laid out my holes for the rollers and then tacked the 6 inch plate on. And then I built another frame, the actual frame that's gonna roll in and out of 1.5 inch square 14 gauge, I believe. Pretty much the same exact dimensions as the 2 inch, and then used that for the actual piece that's gonna slide back and forth, and that the clothes rack is actually going to be welded to. So on the rollers that I bolted on this 6 inch flat, I found these rollers on Amazon, and I got the proper dimension that I say proper in my opinion, the size that I wanted, that I thought would be plenty heavy enough, and with the hole in the center of the roller that was going to be able to fit a decent sized bolt. I used a 3/8 bolt on all these rollers, and I put a spacer in between the flat and the roller because I wanted the roller to stick out a little bit and be closer to the center of the 1.5 inch 14 gauge instead of like right on the edge. And then I used a lock nut to put on the very end of the bolt. That way these rollers wouldn't ever work their way off. You know, I didn't want a roller coming off, so I used lock nuts. And then I was able to tighten the lock nut up pretty snug, because on that roller there's a little, on the centerpiece, the lock nut hits the roller, but it doesn't stop it from rolling, if that makes sense. So these rollers worked out good. I found them on Amazon. They got all different sizes. Hopefully they last a long time. So after I got the 1.5 inch square 14 gauge frame built, I was able to try out the rolling apparatus, which was super exciting. Anytime I'm building a project like this, like a custom project, I feel like a kid building his first box car or whatever. You're just ready to try it. So it's one of my favorite things about custom projects, is moments like this. So I was able to try out the rolling apparatus. Worked real good, except it did have a little bit of a bow whenever I slid it all the way out. I left a couple feet in there because, you know what I mean, you don't want to slide it all the way out, obviously. But so with a couple feet left in, and I kind of pushed down on the back that did have a little bit of a bow, but I wasn't overly worried about this because, as you will see, I ended up taking some 1¼ inch flat and standing it up, putting it in between my two like main runners for my clothes rack, and that stiffened it right up. Wasn't no big deal, but if I could do it over again, I would use something else with a little more structural integrity that way, you know. But anyway, it worked out good. I used some 1.5 inch OD, I believe, pipe for OD as an outside dimension for the clothes rack itself. Got with Kayla. Yes, I get with Kayla, my wife, on several projects when it comes to like custom, whether it's a custom entrance like design, or custom project like this. I do like to get a second opinion. My second opinion a lot of times is my wife or other buddies, but I do like to get my wife's point of view. Even though I'm stubborn, I like to do things my own way. I do like to hear her opinion because she has great ideas. She's got a good imagination. So I do appreciate her input. And I got with her, and that is how we come up with this design. I put 4 posts, 1 on each corner, and I put 1 in the middle. That way all the clothes in the middle wouldn't have to go around a post, you know what I mean? They would just be able to slide right on by that middle post. I did have a couple of shirts to hang on here to try to get an idea of the width of everything. I did a lot of what I call dry fitting on this job. I took clothes and hung them up there before I ever built my clothes rack to make sure the clothes weren't going to be overlapping too much in the middle, or at all ideally, depending on what size of shirt. That's something else that I ran into as I was building this. Was I had been hanging my extra large welding shirts on here, and they cleared the main bottom of this rack pretty good. But again, Kayla informed me that, well, what about a 3X shirt? You know, in the arosswelding store, we carry these Martin Brothers shirts now, and so therefore we were able to have a 3X shirt to try, and we tried it on here, and it did drag. So I wasn't overly concerned about it. You know, I had plans on, you know, covering up the rollers somehow, but as far as it catching, I wasn't too worried about it. To be honest, I wasn't too worried about it at all, but thanks to Kayla, she said, you better get with the customer and just make sure, let her know that, like, you know, the clothes are gonna be dragging if they're anything over extra large, 2X, whatever, just so they're aware of it. And I'm glad she told me that. So I got with the customer, and she got with somebody else, got another opinion, and through her asking, somebody suggested a piece of aluminum or stainless to set on top of everything. So that was an add-on on this project, but I was able to add that on, no big deal. I had Stillwater Steel there in Stillwater, Oklahoma, break it for me, and I just used self-tapping screws and put a piece of aluminum on top of this, and made it look good too, you know, made it look a lot cleaner. You couldn't see any of the working parts. So before I got to the aluminum, I was racking my brains a lot about the latch system, you know, stops, so this thing wouldn't slide all the way out, and so it would be locked in place whenever you're going down the road. And what I come up with was a latch like this. Stillwater Steel and Railroad Yard both carry these, and you could probably literally Google spring-loaded latch and find one of these easily. But I ended up using timeout, hold up. We got an interruption to the program due to a very important announcement. Austin, take it over.
It's time.
It is.
So go looking at the box. I'm not sure why we haven't got this open yet.
I haven't opened it because I didn't know where we were putting it. No, as far as
Filming it?
yeah, like what video to put it in. I guess this is a good one, huh? So this is pretty exciting, and I want to thank everyone who allowed this to happen. Like Kayla said, we've had this for a few weeks now, and so this is pretty cool. Wow. Looks different than ones I've seen online, doesn't it?
They changed it.
Either way, that's neat. That's super cool. It's pretty cool.
I know. It's awesome.
So thank you guys. Thank everyone who made this possible.
Yeah.
Super humbled.
Karen just hit the tripod.
Thanks, Karen. Appreciate it. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. Shouldn't say Austin Ross, it should say all of you.
That's awesome.
That is very cool. Thank you.
Oh my goodness. Look how easy that was.
Oh, wow. Wow.
It's been setting on our kitchen table for months.
Yeah, I know we had to film the opening, so I don't touch it unless I'm going to be filming it, but I didn't know where to film it, so I haven't opened it yet. But for real though, thank all of you for all your support. It means a lot to Kayla and I. Thank you for watching. Thank you for showing up every week. Thanks for all the support in whichever way you support us. It's greatly appreciated. 3 of these, 2 in the back that went out like this, and I drilled holes in that 6-inch flat, and then a couple of pulleys, and then 1 at the front welded on this plate with a chain hook welded on the end, and then some coated cable adjusted accordingly. And I built a custom handle that I welded onto this, and you pull it out and slide it. I did put a catch in the middle. I haven't asked her if that's really necessary. I feel like it's probably not that necessary because I don't imagine that she only pulls it halfway out, because if you're gonna pull it out, chances are you pull it all the way out, but I don't know. So I'll have to ask her if that was necessary. It might be more annoying than it is necessary, which I can always fill in them holes, no big deal, and then wouldn't be an issue. But anyway, I put 3 sets of holes, 1 in the back to keep it all the way closed, 1 in the center, like I said, for a center catch, and then 1 on the very end so it doesn't come all the way out. Yeah, I mean, it took some trial and error, you know, to get the cables right and figure out what I was gonna do with this latch here. Anyway, once I got the latch system figured out, I was able to get this aluminum put on here, put self-tapping screws, put it all down, and then, well, actually before I did the aluminum, I did have to create some way to attach it to the van, and I attached it in 4 places. I put actually 1 of these on each side at the back of the van that slid right down into where the van seats used to bolt into. And then in the front of the van, I welded some plates with holes in them, and then I made some brackets to go down in the part, again, where the seats mounted to, with some bolts sticking up, and then I just put a nut on them bolts and sucked it down. So the front was bolted down, and then the back just had this to keep it from going back and forth, and that worked good. And here it all is. I was pretty happy with the overall turnout. There's a few things I would change. A couple I've already mentioned, you know, some tweaks that could happen, make it better. I mean, I always believe in making something better. Even if you think it's good, there's always room for improvement. One thing that I kind of want to touch on before I end this video is the difference in custom projects versus like projects that you do all the time, like a lot of. Like, for instance, people that build metal buildings, that's a niche, like a certain something that you do all the time, versus custom, you know. Or like pipe fence, you know, some people start a welding business and they do primarily pipe fence. So the reason I bring this up is because I know a lot of you that watch are wanting to get into the welding industry, no matter what that is, or you're going to welding school for welding, or maybe you haven't been in it long and you're trying to figure out where you want to go with it all. I'm not really going to sit here and tell you my advice on what I think you should do, but I just want to point out the awareness of custom fabrication versus niching in something. I think both are good. I think it's good to be diverse, but I think it's something to be careful with when taking on custom projects, because there's a lot of unknowns and a lot more thinking and a lot more time put into custom projects than there is something that you've done a lot of. Like, I know a guy that has done a lot of pipe fence, way more than I have, and he's got a crew that does that, but he also has a crew that builds metal buildings. And so he's been able to, that's mostly his business model. I mean, I think he used to kind of do other little welding jobs here and there, but mostly what people know him for is pipe fence and metal buildings. And that right there is like a niche. And what's good about that is you can get your prices down. You can be really efficient because you're doing the same thing over and over, essentially. I mean, you might have a custom, you know, I'm sure he runs into custom size barns and stuff that he builds. But as far as like the trim work, the metal work, like everything, and that just is fluctuated in his price per square foot and stuff. Long story short, you're able to be more efficient with something that you niche down into. So that's kind of good for a business, in my opinion. But the neat thing about custom is a lot of people, like myself and my wife, Kayla, we're attracted to custom because, I guess because we're needy, we're high maintenance, some would say. I don't know, like we want a certain something. We want, like, we've got a spot in our house or in our camper, we want something to fit in that spot. And you can shop online all day, and the measurements that you find for this certain cabinet to fit in that certain area are never a match, so you have to go custom. So custom has its place. It's just gotta be, you gotta be targeted to the right clientele that don't mind paying for it, because if not, you're spending a lot of time in design, engineer, and also fabricating something, and it's easy to get in over your head when it comes to custom projects. So I guess I'll kind of leave it there because I could go really deep into this, business stuff. I don't have it all figured out by no means. I'm learning as I go here. But this van project, it's, I have a custom background because I worked at Stillwater Steel for 3 years right after high school, and we've done a bunch of this type of stuff. So I don't feel out of my realm doing that stuff. But with that being said, there was still things that came up that I didn't think about or didn't plan because I don't do that all the time. I absolutely love custom projects, but being a YouTuber and getting questions all the time in the comments and emails and stuff, you really dissect things and you really notice what people's pain points are, that's wanting to get into this industry or do what I do. So that's something I wanted to point out because I think it's super helpful to be aware of whenever you're thinking about what to do with your welding business. I always encourage people to do what they love doing, like what you enjoy the most. Like if you think you want a pipeline, but you get out and pipeline and you don't like it because you're away from home too much, or you don't like it because they weld too much, all day, or you don't like it because you don't like doing the same thing over and over, or whatever the reason may be. If you get to doing something and you don't enjoy it, I encourage you to find something else in the industry. That's one of the good things about welding, is there's such a broad range of things that you can do within the welding industry in general that you can kind of pick and choose, It just takes a lot of work when starting out, to get that business coming your way. That's the hardest part, I would say, about starting any business, is drumming up enough work to have a sustainable business. But there's always the option of working for someone else also. You don't have to own your own thing. Maybe you don't want to own your own thing. In fact, if you are just starting out, I do encourage you to work for somebody else for a while, maybe doing a couple different things. Go work for this person for a couple years doing this type of welding, go work for this person or this company doing this type of welding, and get a feel for what you enjoy doing most, not to mention the experience you're getting to be able to start your own business. So anyway, that's kind of my thoughts, what I've learned over the years. It's not the Bible. I encourage you to try things out yourself, ask others around you. Hope you all enjoyed the video. Remember, learn something every day.